welcome to day 5 of Vlogmas. I'm Shannon Makes, Christmas crafter by day, circus artist by night, and never has that been more true than in this series as I'm traveling around the US with a touring Christmas production and filling pretty much every spare moment with some sort of crafting. Last episode, we had just left Savannah and the cutest little bookstore ever and headed to the next city for a little knitting update, which involved a bit of a plot twist. So if you haven't seen that and you'd like to get all caught up on it, there is a Vlogmas playlist linked right up in the corner as well as in the description, so you can make sure you're all up to date. Today, we're in Charleston, South Carolina, a city that I didn't really know much about and wasn't unusually excited to visit until I found out that this is where Stede Bonnet, gentleman pirate of the seas, and frequent inspiration for this channel, drew his last breath. So now I'm super excited to go out and visit Charleston and learn about some of this super interesting history. And fortunately, we do actually have quite a bit of time before tonight's show in which to do that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But first, I figure let's do a little bit of work on the chicken scratch project that I mentioned in the very first episode. Also, let's just acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the giant jacuzzi hot tub in the middle of the bedroom. Let's not talk about it. It's weird. So in my first Vlogmas episode, I mentioned that I was bringing this gingham on tour to try my hand at some chicken scratch embroidery, which was inspired by some vintage aprons I had found at a local antique store. And I thought that, first of all, they were super cute, but also that the scope of that project was going to be very manageable for me while I was on tour. Because, as we have kind of discovered through the course of this series, I do not often have access to large flat surfaces or sewing machines or kind of any other sewing tool besides scissors, needle, and thread. And that's not to say that you need all these fancy tools for sewing, not at all. In fact, I have two videos, this one and this one, which are literally directly kind of trying to fight the notion that you need a lot of fancy tools and a big budget to make beautiful clothes. They're really great videos. I tackle some really fun challenges on a really tight budget and with some creative use of tools. But I will also say that while I'm here on tour, I just have very, very limited energy to do creative problem solving. And also we're like packing things up literally every day to travel. So I'm looking for like very simple projects that don't take a ton of brain power. And as we've already seen, my knitting plans kind of took a curve into the more complicated, so trying to stay simple with my sewing. That's why I decided to bring the gingham and bust it out and get started on some chicken scratch because it looks very fun and very simple. However, after about 15 seconds of Googling how to do chicken scratch embroidery, I realized I need an embroidery hoop and I do not have an embroidery hoop with me. So the actual sewing is gonna have to wait until I can get my hands on one, but in the meantime, I thought let's just talk about the design plans, get that phase sort of figured out, and that way, once I do get my hands on a hoop, I can just jump right in with the actual sewing and the planning process will be mostly figured out. So, with that said, I'm thinking I wanna sew an apron. Figured it would be very suitable, kind of based off of the inspiration for this whole project. Let's start with an apron. Then my next logical thought was, well, let's do this apron pattern. If you watched the first Vlogmas episode, you will recognize it because I went over it. It is my cobbler's apron, but once I pulled it out and started looking at it again, it's maybe not quite the design that I had in mind for this apron. I had something more along the lines of this, with like basically a simple gathered rectangular panel for the skirt portion, some sort of belt, and then a basic pinafore style top. Actually not too far off from my zero waist apron pattern, which I actually could use that or a variation of that for this apron as well. But if y'all really like this pattern and you want to see me do this one with the chicken scratch motif, let me know. We can consider doing that. Otherwise, if you have a vintage pattern that's more along the lines of this, what I was originally thinking, throw recommended patterns in the comments. So then next I figured let's look at some of the inspiration images that I've been finding, because I have been trying to gather some images, things that I really like, motifs that I want to replicate, and I thought let's look at them together so we can all get on the same page, and also you can give me your input, what you think that I should do. The first image that I found that I really fell in love with was this one right here. It's this lovely blue gingham with this lace style embroidery on it. And what I really love about this is how it takes something just super simple as, you know, just basic gingham fabric, and makes it look super fancy and intricate. Super fancy for me. I think it looks super fancy. So if I remember correctly, the website that I got this image from, she said that she had done all of the stitches in either 2 or 3 strands of embroidery floss, except for the square border at the top and the bottom, which is more like 6 strands, which I really like that effect. It makes the lacy bits look lacy, but then it really like solidifies the border. I thought that was super cool. The only thing that I was less interested in was the fact that it's very un-Christmassy. So I thought, like, let's look for some Christmas specific motifs. And my very first result that popped up was a Christmas tree. There are a couple different images that have been floating around with Christmas tree motifs. I think I prefer this second one here, maybe just because it's better quality, but also it seems to have a slightly different use of yellow in it. And I really like this. I think it's very cute, but I also think it could easily look a bit gaudy if not used with care, if it's too big, if there are a ton of them. So what I was thinking was, what if we do a couple Christmas trees, but we keep them limited to patch pockets? So, you know, like maybe like about this size, maybe we do 2 of them. They can be symmetrical on the apron. They can be nice, big, practical patch pockets, but with a little touch of whimsy. But again, not too much Christmas, not too gaudy. Again, remember, I'm the one with the plain white Christmas lights, so that's kind of the direction I personally am leaning in. And then I wanted to find something to do kind of along the bottom hem of the skirt of the apron. So that led me to find this image here, which seems to be some sort of placemat. And you can see it's got kind of 2 different motifs. It's got the chunky corners, and then it has this slightly more delicate lacy motif that connects the corners. And what I'm thinking, because I really love this, if we look at this other alternative view of it, I just love how it's a little bit more subtle. It's just mostly greens and whites with these little hints of red that keep it like classy, not too gaudy. So I think I'm really enjoying this specific motif, and I'm wondering if I can do something where if we take the hem of the skirt, we take 2 corners, the corner motifs on either edge of the hem, and then we connect them with the lacy motif from this image here. The lace would obviously be a lot longer because the skirt's going to be much wider than this placemat. And then I don't think I'll do anything going up the edges of the apron, or maybe I would do like a little bit of the lacy motif but kind of feather it off into nothing. And then I think what would be really cool would be to mirror that motif but in a smaller scale along the top portion of the apron, so the part that covers your chest. And I think I would like to do it a little bit lighter, because for me personally, I find it a little bit more balanced when the heavier motif is at the bottom and the lighter motif up towards the top. So if we could just replicate it, so you tie the 2 parts of the apron together, but find a way to make it like a little bit lighter or a little bit smaller, something like that. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. What I really like is that this uses colors of embroidery floss that I have with me. So if we look at the close-up image, it looks like it's got 2 different greens, a darker and a medium green, and then 1 red and a white. And I have all of those colors with me on tour. Those were literally the only colors that I brought with me. I have kind of a hodgepodge, so We might be using multiple shades of green throughout the project, but I don't want to go buy more thread. Let's just use what I have with me. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of designs. Let me know if you have other ideas. You've got some cute motifs. I did find a really cute snowflake pattern. Let's see if I can find it. It is on red gingham. Let's use our imagination and put it on green gingham. And I love that it's like very delicate, very whimsical, a cute little snowflake. What I thought was maybe we could include some kind of just lightly scattered over the body of the apron. But then I was wondering, is that gonna be too much? Like with the Christmas trees and the border at the bottom and the border at the top, is it gonna be too much to also have snowflakes? So I don't know, what do we think on the snowflake portion? Be sure to weigh in. Let me know what you're thinking. Are there other ideas that I haven't thought of? Should I be using this pattern and then sewing it up later at home? Should I be going more with my initial mental image of the apron? Decisions to be made. But for now, I'm gonna put that aside and I'm gonna go into Charleston and take a tour of the historic city. So let's get dressed and let's go. I knew nothing about Charleston heading into town and was happy to discover that the city was actually really lovely. The weather still didn't feel like Christmas to me, but it was still a very cheerful visit and the architecture made up for the palm trees. Then we met up with another cast member to take a tour of the town dungeon, built in the 1770s. There's actually far more to the building than that, but that was what drew us there for the tour.
All right, this is a great question. 25 years ago, the museum paid somebody to do a survey of how many bricks are in the building. Okay? You ready? So here it is. Here's the specific number that they gave them after a couple tens of thousands of dollars. 1 to 2 million bricks. You can honestly. That's what I was thinking. All right, so please watch your step because the brick floor that you're going to be walking on is older than the country itself. Therefore, the footing is even more precarious through the streets of Charleston. And the cellar is going to be designated their military prison, their provost, this location where those who have been reprimanded within their own army are going to be concealed. We're going to get to that in a second.
Well, that was super fun. We all really enjoyed it, had a great time. Our tour guide was both knowledgeable and entertaining, and his enthusiasm for the history and the topics at hand were equally matched by his enthusiasm to discover that there were a bunch of circus artists taking his tour who were performing later that night not far from his house. So we did invite him to come see the show tonight. We hope that he'll be there, but you never know. Unfortunately, we did not get to go visit Stede Bonnet's grave. That ended up being another 15-minute walk away, and we just didn't have time. We had to come back here for the show, but it was super fun to learn about the very rich and, to me, surprising history of pirating in Charleston. There was a ton of it happening. That was very surprising for me to learn until you consider that actually Charleston at that point was the richest city in all of the colonies at the time. So there was just a lot of money, a lot of goods, trade, influential people coming and going. So it does seem like a prime target for pirating. I could honestly go on and on. I was fascinated by the history, but I will just say that I could easily have spent another day there learning about the history, studying the architecture, eating all the good food, and finding the cutest dogs to pet. So if you are there, if you're in town, definitely recommend taking some tours of the historic city, learning about it, and if you happen to visit Stede Bonnet's grave, please send me a photo. It was just something I would have liked to do, just didn't have the time because I had to come back here and do a show. So let's go do a show. The show was a good one, Charleston was a great audience, and then before we knew it, it was time to tear down and head out. I have been getting some questions about the food and eating situation on the road, which is understandable because nutrition is important for everyone, but it's kind of extra important for us in our situations because we're working with our bodies, and if we get sick, that really messes up the run of the show. Plus, we just want to have enough energy and stamina and feel good for what is a very rigorous and grueling tour schedule. We don't want to eat out. That gets really old really fast. We have this guy, and it is an absolute lifesaver. So this is basically a hot plate and pot all in one, which is very, very fun because it means, well, one, it means you can't really set anything on fire, which is always a benefit. Hotels tend to not like you having hot plates. It's usually not allowed because they are like a fire hazard. But this, you can't set anything on fire with it. It just sits right on the counter. The bottom doesn't get hot. It plugs in right in the handle. And it's been amazing. Honestly, absolute lifesaver. It boils water pretty quickly. It's been cooking all of our meals. So what we've been doing is going out and getting the packets of rice and then getting some sort of vegetable. This did come with a steamer that fits right in the top. So we've been steaming a lot of vegetables. Other times we'll cook them. I do have a little bit of oil here so I can cook some vegetables, and then we'll often get a meat as well, a protein. So if we are in a situation where we don't have time to cook, or if we have to travel with it, I have been doing canned meat. Not my favorite choice, but honestly pretty practical given the situations. But if we're in a city like this one where we're here for 2 days, I'll try and go grocery shopping on the first day and get a small enough package of meat that I can cook enough today to last me for a meal today and tomorrow. We've also been doing our coffees in the morning with this little guy. It's a portable coffee maker. It's silicone. It collapses. It's very, very slick. And just so we don't get too homesick, we've got our Tim Hortons with us. So that's what we've been doing in terms of eating, and it's been working very well for us. We do admittedly sometimes eat out in restaurants, but not very often. People often think that that's like a perk of being on the road, is that you eat all your meals out, but honestly, for us anyway, it gets pretty old pretty fast, and sometimes you just want vegetables that aren't soaked in oil and that you've cooked yourself. So really enjoying the setup we've got going, and this little puppy is an absolute lifesaver. Okay friends, so today's patterns all come from one of my favorite antique stores, which happens to be right around the corner from my parents' house. So I am frequently in there bopping in. I always check out their selection of patterns, and that's actually a little bit more complicated than it sounds because it's one antique store and it's 2 levels, basement and main floor, but they basically sell space in that store to different vendors. So I think they told me last time I was in there that they had 52 different vendors. So it's not like you walk in and there's one clear sewing section. There's you have to go to every stall and check out do they have any sewing supplies. Fortunately, I've been there enough that I kind of have a feel for which vendors tend to have sewing supplies or patterns, notions, that type of thing. So I can be a little bit more efficient about it. But if I have time, I always swing by and check out everything because you never know when somebody's gonna have gone to an estate sale, for example, and have gotten patterns when they usually don't. But there's one vendor that always have patterns, and I always sit down and go through, and it's very fun. So there are a bunch of patterns from that. The first one here, this one actually does not have the original envelope. It probably was in very rough shape. So that means we don't have a year on it. I will try to use a Google image search to see if I can find out more information on this pattern, but judging by the hat and the haircut, I'm guessing maybe early 40s, somewhere in there. I'm definitely not an expert, but what caught my eye is I really enjoy these little bits right there that are they've got the stripes going horizontally, whereas the rest of the dress has them going vertically. So I thought that was kind of fun. Not really loving it when they're in lace over here. Very much not my style personally. Really much more enjoying the play with the geometric, the stripes, and also how it's echoed down here on the hips too. I'm guessing that those are for pockets, and if they're not, if I make the dress, they're gonna be where the pockets go. It does not say what size it is, unfortunately. We've got to look at the back here. I don't even know honestly what brand it is because even the brand is cut off, but I bet once I open it, there's gonna be the brand on here. So let's literally have not opened hardly any of these patterns. So the fact that there is a thick wad, instantly encouraging. I'm gonna see if I can find any instructions. What is kind of fun is I can see that the person who used this used a tracing wheel, because some of these patterns, I don't think you're gonna be able to see it, but they have perforations from where the tracing wheel punched through. Okay, we've got actually the pattern number on here is 7185, and then it also says 20. So I'm wondering if that means it's a size 20. As we can see, this one has been cut out and used, but also everything is folded up and in very good condition. So I'm hopeful that there are all the pieces here. And as we can see, it's a very thick wad. There are a lot of pieces here. So I am hopeful about that, but there do not seem to be, oh, yes, there are. Oh, they were just hiding. Instructions. Let's see what we learn from the instructions. Okay. It's McCall's Cut and Sew Guide 7185. Again, we have instructions how to cut, cutting with pinking shears, tailor's tacks, so some basic information on here, and then cutting layout, lots and lots of cutting layouts here, and then assembly instructions on the back, which is kind of fun. Very fun, love it. So that just about does it for this one. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I apologize that there wasn't quite as much crafting content in this one as I had hoped, purely due to poor planning on my part, but hopefully we can get my hands on an embroidery hoop shortly, can start on some actual chicken scratch, and also I will have a knitting update for you in the next city, which is Detroit. Quite looking forward to that one. Not entirely sure what to expect from the city itself, but I have heard that we're in a very gorgeous and historic theater, so I am definitely looking forward to that one. Be sure to tune in to see all about the theater and for all those crafting updates. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!